Greed destroys more traders than any crash ever will. But what if greed isn't the enemy? What if it's just a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself you haven't mastered yet? Today, we're not talking about charts or numbers. We're talking about the chemistry of desire and the psychology of never feeling enough. Have you ever stared at your trading screen, watching a profit melt away because you just couldn't close the position? Have you ever felt that electric rush, that pulse of excitement, as the numbers turned green and something inside whispered, just a little more? And when the market turned against you, did you feel that same whisper twist into shame, frustration, disbelief? You knew what you should have done, but you didn't, because something deeper was in control, not logic, not your plan, but that invisible force called greed. If you've ever felt that, you're not weak, you're human. And what we're about to explore together may completely reshape the way you see the market and yourself. If you're ready to take control of your trading mind and rebuild discipline, make sure to subscribe, because this isn't just about charts or strategies. It's about mastering the one market that rules them all, the market inside your mind. This is the psychology of greed, why more is never enough. Picture this. A man sits alone in the glow of his computer screen. His name doesn't matter. It could be David or Mark, or maybe it could be you. He started trading with excitement, charts, indicators, dreams of freedom. He built a small account. He studied risk management, read every book he could find. But every time he gained a little, something inside him whispered, more. One day, he made his biggest trade ever. He doubled his account in 2 days. He felt unstoppable, dopamine flooding his brain like a jackpot win. Then the next day, he lost it all. Not because the market tricked him, but because he couldn't stop. He kept chasing that feeling, the high of being right. And in that chase, he crossed the invisible line between trading and gambling. The moment he lost, he didn't see numbers. He saw betrayal. He saw punishment. He saw failure. But the truth? The market never betrayed him. It just reflected him. The market is a mirror, always showing you who you really are when no one's watching. And for most people, that reflection is uncomfortable, because it shows a truth we don't want to face. We're not driven by logic. We're driven by chemistry. Let's talk about dopamine. That tiny molecule is the currency of your brain's reward system. Every time you anticipate a win, not even get it, just anticipate it, dopamine spikes. According to a Stanford neurofinance study, the dopamine surge begins 0.8 seconds before you make an impulsive financial decision. That means before you even click buy or sell, your brain has already decided how much it wants the thrill of being right. It's not the market that makes you impulsive. It's your biology. See, dopamine isn't evil. It's the engine of progress, curiosity, ambition. It's why you set goals, why you get out of bed. But in the market, or in business or relationships, dopamine can become a drug. The more you taste it, the less sensitive your receptors become. You start needing bigger wins, faster profits, riskier plays, just to feel the same emotional rush you once got from a small victory. That's the paradox of greed. It's not hunger for more. It's the inability to feel satisfied with enough. When traders say, I know my strategy works, I just can't stick to it, what they're really saying is, my dopamine system has hijacked my decision-making. Because discipline isn't about willpower. It's about neurochemistry. Think about casinos. They don't make money because people are stupid. They make money because people's brains are predictable. Every slot machine, every flashing light, every sound is designed to trigger dopamine anticipation loops. Small, unpredictable rewards that keep you hooked. Now, here's the hard truth. Your trading platform does the same thing. Every tick, every green candle, every ding of a profit notification reinforces the same reward pathway that keeps gamblers glued to the machine. And when you lose, that sting of pain doesn't end the cycle. it deepens it. Because loss activates the same neural circuitry as craving. That's why after a big loss, you don't want to stop. You want to win it back. Not because you believe in your setup, but because your brain is desperate to relieve the chemical withdrawal. Visualize this for a moment. You're sitting in front of your screen. The market moves fast. Your heart rate rises. Your breathing shortens. Your logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, is trying to analyze risk, but your limbic system, your emotional core, is flooding with dopamine and cortisol. You're no longer trading. You're reacting. And in that moment, greed and fear become twins. Two sides of the same chemical coin. Greed is not wanting more. It's the fear of losing the feeling of having more. That's why no matter how big the win, it's never enough. Because what you really want isn't money. It's emotional certainty. It's the illusion of control. But the market, like life, doesn't reward illusion. It rewards awareness. Pause and breathe. Feel your chest rise. Remind yourself, every impulse to overtrade, every urge to just one more, isn't a character flaw. It's a survival circuit built to chase pleasure and avoid pain. It kept our ancestors alive, but it keeps modern traders enslaved. Here's where the real work begins. Learning to outsmart your own brain. Behavioral economics calls this the consistency paradox. You know what you should do, follow your plan, respect your stop loss, take profits when scheduled, but your behavior drifts because emotions distort time. When dopamine spikes, the present moment expands. You forget the future. You forget your rules. You forget that your job is not to be right, but to survive. Loss aversion then kicks in. Research from Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky shows that the pain of losing is about 2.5 times stronger than the pleasure of winning. So you chase losses not to make money, but to avoid pain. You violate rules not because you're reckless, but because you're trying to fix an emotion. That's not trading. That's therapy gone wrong. What makes greed so seductive is that it disguises itself as ambition. Ambition tells you to grow. Greed tells you to fill a void. Ambition serves purpose. Greed serves addiction. One expands you. The other consumes you. And here's the hardest part. In the beginning, they feel the same. Every great trader or entrepreneur starts with ambition, the desire to build, to prove, to create freedom. But somewhere along the path, if you stop managing your internal state, dopamine starts managing you. You stop trading your plan and start trading your emotions. You stop chasing mastery and start chasing sensation. You stop creating wealth and start feeding need. I've coached traders who've made millions and still couldn't sleep at night. They weren't worried about losing money. They were terrified of losing the feeling of being on top. Because when you live in constant dopamine pursuit, silence feels like withdrawal. Calm feels like boredom. And boredom, in a dopamine-driven mind, feels like death. So you open another position, you start another project, you take another risk, not out of strategy, but out of anxiety. That's how greed evolves, from excitement to compulsion. It's not only traders, it's entrepreneurs, executives, investors, even ordinary people scrolling social media, chasing that next hit of validation. The same neurochemical story repeats. Anticipation, reward, crash, repeat. It's a feedback loop, and like any loop, it can be broken, but only from the inside out. Reflect for a moment on your last big win. Close your eyes and remember how it felt. The surge, the relief, the confidence. Now recall what you did next. Did you scale back and follow your plan? Or did you raise your risk, trying to recapture that same high? That's the moment where discipline dies. Because greed doesn't whisper, "Take more money." It whispers, "Don't lose this feeling." When I work with high-level traders and CEOs, I often see the same emotional architecture. success, overstimulation, then self-sabotage. They tell me, I know better, I just can't stop. That's not lack of knowledge, that's dopamine dependency. And like any addiction, the first step isn't quitting. It's awareness, because awareness is the beginning of control. The goal isn't to eliminate dopamine. You can't. You need it. The goal is to reshape its relationship with your actions, to delay it, to tie it not to results, but to the right process. Think of it as compounding behavior. In finance, compounding means small, consistent growth leads to exponential results. In psychology, compounding behavior means small, consistent habits lead to exponential control. Every time you choose patience over impulse, awareness over reaction, you're building mental capital, the invisible wealth that makes every other kind of wealth possible. But you can't build mental capital in chaos. You need rituals. The first ritual is what I call the pre-market mindset. Before you trade, before you even open a chart, visualize your internal environment. Ask yourself, what emotional state am I bringing to the market today? Are you calm, centered, observant? Or are you restless, craving, reactive? Because if you bring chaos to the market will magnify it. If you bring clarity, the market will mirror that too. The market doesn't test your skill, it tests your state. So before you trade, breathe. Close your eyes. Visualize yourself not as a player, but as an observer. Let the market move. Let prices dance. Let your ego sit quietly in the corner. When your breathing slows, your focus sharpens. When your heart steadies, your decisions follow. This isn't philosophy, it's neuroscience. Slow breathing activates your vagus nerve, lowering cortisol and increasing prefrontal control, the very region you need to make rational decisions. In other words, calm isn't a luxury, it's a strategy. Every great trader I've met, from hedge fund managers to disciplined scalpers, has a pre-performance ritual. It might be journaling, meditation, a cold shower, a simple mantra. Whatever it is, it's not superstition, it's state conditioning. They're not preparing for the market, they're preparing for themselves, because when the bell rings, your biggest enemy isn't volatility, it's your untrained emotion. Greed thrives in untrained minds. It feeds on uncertainty, boredom, and ego. So your first task as a trader isn't to find better setups, it's to find better states. Train your mind the way athletes train their bodies. Visualization, reflection, routine, these are your mental weights. Each repetition builds discipline. Each discipline compounds clarity. Pause and think about the irony. People spend years learning technical analysis, risk management, economic theory, yet spend almost no time learning emotional regulation. But the 90% who fail aren't missing knowledge, they're missing self-control, and self-control begins with knowing your triggers. What triggers your greed? Is it seeing someone else win? Is it the silence after a loss? Is it boredom between trades? Track it. Journal it. Don't judge it. Patterns repeated are patterns revealed. Once you recognize your emotional pattern, you can predict your behavior. And once you can predict your behavior, you can control it. That's how you turn psychology into profit. Let me leave you with a thought before we move deeper into this journey. You don't lose control because the market is unpredictable. You lose control because you keep trading to feel something instead of to execute something. Trading is a mirror, and every time you stare into it, it reflects your discipline, your fears, and your hidden hunger for more. But remember this, the market doesn't punish greed, it exposes it. And once it's exposed, you can choose. You can keep chasing the rush, or you can start reclaiming your mind. Because the moment you learn to delay the rush, that's the moment you become free. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine you're standing at the edge of a cliff. Below you lies the market, chaotic, endless, filled with light and noise. You know you should stay on solid ground, but there's something intoxicating about that edge. Something magnetic that whispers. Just one more trade. That whisper is not logic. It's not intuition. It's chemistry. It's the voice of dopamine calling for another fix. Another moment of stimulation. Most traders think their problem is fear or greed. But in truth, it's time distortion. When dopamine floods your brain, it hijacks your sense of time. The next 10 seconds feel more important than the next 10 years. You forget your plan. You forget your goals. You forget who you promised to be. That's why greed isn't just a moral flaw. It's a neurological imbalance. The human brain was never designed for the modern market. It evolved for survival, for hunting, gathering, scanning horizons for threats or opportunities. Every flicker on a chart, every tick up or down, hijacks that same survival system. You feel a spike of excitement at a green candle. Your brain releases dopamine. You feel a drop. Your brain releases cortisol. You've turned an ancient survival instinct into an emotional slot machine. In behavioral neuroscience, this is called intermittent reinforcement. It's the most addictive learning pattern ever discovered. When rewards are random, unpredictable, the brain releases more dopamine, not less. That's why traders can't stop refreshing charts. Why investors can't stop checking portfolios. Each time you check, you're gambling with your own biochemistry. There's a famous study from the University of Cambridge that found professional traders' testosterone levels spike up to 74% during profitable streaks. That's not just biology, that's behavior shaping itself through chemistry. When testosterone and dopamine combine, you become more confident, more aggressive, and far more prone to overestimate your skill. It's why you double down after a win, even when you shouldn't. It's why success often plants the seed of your next failure. But you're not powerless. Once you understand that greed is chemistry, you can reprogram it. The first step is to separate desire from dopamine. Dopamine doesn't measure success. It measures anticipation. It rewards you for expecting reward, not achieving it. So if you can redirect your anticipation from outcomes to actions, you can flip the entire system in your favor. Visualize this. Instead of craving profit, crave execution. Instead of chasing the thrill of winning, chase the calm of doing the right thing. Imagine feeling the same rush of satisfaction from following your rules as you once felt from breaking them. That's the beginning of freedom, turning discipline into its own reward. You see, the reason greed feels so powerful is that it mimics passion. Passion drives you forward. Greed drags you down. Passion says, I want to grow. Greed says, I want to consume. Passion builds identity. Greed erases it. And when you trade or work from a place of erased identity, you become reactive, not creative. You start defining yourself by numbers, by likes, by charts, by temporary highs. The market becomes your mirror. And when that mirror breaks, so does your confidence. But confidence, true confidence, isn't born from outcomes. It's born from consistency. And consistency isn't built through intensity. It's built through ritual. Let's talk about the second ritual, journaling and pattern recognition. Most traders hate journaling. They think it's boring, mechanical, a waste of time. But neuroscience says otherwise. Writing transforms emotion into cognition. When you write, you transfer chaotic neural energy from the amygdala, the emotional center, to the prefrontal cortex, the rational center. You literally move your feelings from the body into the brain. That's why the simple act of writing, I felt anxious when I entered this trade, can reduce the anxiety itself. Because your mind stops drowning in emotion and starts observing it. Imagine keeping a journal not just of trades, but of triggers. When did greed whisper to you? What time of day? After how many wins? After how many losses? What words did your inner voice use? I deserve this. I can't miss out. Just one more? When you capture that voice on paper, you strip it of power. You start seeing it not as truth, but as pattern. And every pattern that becomes visible becomes manageable. Most people think their edge is in the market. It's not. Their edge is in their mind. The ability to recognize emotional repetition before it turns into financial repetition. If you find yourself making the same mistake twice, it's not the market's fault. It's your brain's way of rehearsing an old script. And you can rewrite that script, one conscious page at a time. There's a quote I love from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most traders call it bad luck. But what they're really experiencing is unobserved habit, an emotional reflex mistaken for randomness. That's what greed is. A reflex repeated so often it feels like identity. But it's not who you are. It's who you've rehearsed. If you can rehearse greed, you can rehearse patience. If you can rehearse impulsivity, you can rehearse control. Because your brain is plastic, it changes every time you focus, feel, or act. Neuroplasticity doesn't care if your habit is healthy or harmful. It only cares about repetition. That means the same loop that made you addicted to chasing can make you addicted to discipline, but only if you practice it, consciously, daily, deliberately. So here's your exercise. Before you trade, write down 3 sentences. I will not chase profit. I will chase clarity. I will not reward outcomes. I will reward discipline. I will not fear loss. I will fear losing myself. Then, after the market closes, write down how you felt. Not what you made, what you felt. If you made money but broke your rules, mark it as a loss. If you lost money but stayed disciplined, mark it as a win. That's how you rewire your reward system, by teaching your brain to value process over outcome. It sounds simple, but it's not easy. Because everything in our culture, from social media to finance, glorifies more followers, more trades, more risk, more hustle. We live in a dopamine economy, attention as currency, stimulation as status, and yet the real wealth is calm. Calm is underrated. Calm doesn't get clicks. Calm doesn't trend, but calm wins. Because calm is focus. Calm is clarity. Calm is the distance between impulse and action. That's where every profitable decision is born, in the space between the urge and the choice. Think about it. Every time you pause before reacting, you strengthen your internal equity, your capacity to lead yourself. That's what leadership really is. Emotional liquidity. The ability to stay solvent under pressure. When dopamine spikes, it's like a credit card with no limit. Pleasure now, pain later. When discipline guides you, it's like a savings account. Small deposits of patience that grow into peace. Which account are you funding? If you're honest, most of us have been overdrafting our emotional accounts for years. We keep borrowing from tomorrow's energy to pay for today's excitement. We trade rest for stimulation, presence for performance, meaning for momentum. But every debt must be repaid in the form of burnout, anxiety, emptiness. That's why greed doesn't just destroy accounts. It destroys souls, because it convinces you that fulfillment lives just one step ahead. One more trade, one more deal, one more dollar. When in truth, fulfillment only lives here now, in the quiet mastery of enough. Enough isn't resignation, it's sovereignty. It's the point where you own your mind instead of your mind owning you. Take a breath and imagine what it would feel like to be truly enough, to enter a trade without tension, to close a trade without attachment, to build wealth without sacrificing peace. That's not fantasy. That's emotional maturity. And it starts by changing the story you tell yourself about success. See, greed tells you success is a finish line. Wisdom tells you success is a rhythm, a pattern of thought, emotion, and behavior repeated with integrity. You don't find success at the top of the mountain. You find it in the step that never stops climbing. But here's the paradox. To climb forever, you must rest regularly. The human nervous system can't sustain constant pursuit without collapse. That's why burnout feels so empty. It's your body's way of saying, I can't chase anymore. And when you ignore that signal, greed becomes desperation. Desperation is the shadow of greed. It's when desire turns to fear, and fear disguises itself as urgency. You start believing that if you don't act now, you'll miss everything. That's the illusion of scarcity, the emotional fuel of the modern economy. But abundance isn't a number. It's a nervous system state. When you're calm, you see opportunity everywhere. When you're anxious, you see threat everywhere. The world doesn't change. Your perception does. That's why mastering greed isn't about controlling the market. It's about regulating your nervous system. When you feel that craving rise, that need for action, pause. Breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 6. This simple rhythm resets the vagus nerve, lowers adrenaline, and restores awareness. Do it 5 times. You'll notice the urge soften. You're not killing the emotion. You're reclaiming the space to choose. Because choice, real, conscious choice, is the opposite of greed. Greed reacts. Awareness responds. One is impulse. The other is intelligence. Now let's talk about what happens after greed. Because the cycle doesn't end with a loss. It ends with shame. Shame is the emotional hangover of greed. It's what happens when your actions betray your values. You promised yourself you'd stay disciplined, and you didn't. You told yourself this time would be different, and it wasn't. And instead of analyzing, you internalize. You stop saying, I made a bad decision, and start saying, I am a bad decision. That's the most dangerous belief in trading, the collapse of identity into outcome. Because when you identify with failure, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, you repeat. But here's the truth. Shame isn't your enemy. It's a signal. It's your integrity trying to wake you up. It says you're better than your behavior. Listen to it, but don't live in it. Forgive yourself for every impulsive trade, every greedy moment, every emotional spiral. Not because it wasn't a mistake, but because guilt without growth is just self-punishment. Growth begins the moment you turn guilt into guidance. Ask yourself, what did this moment teach me about my mind? Not about the market, about me. That's how you extract wisdom from pain, by turning mistakes into mirrors. Every loss is feedback. Every win is a test. Every reaction is a reflection. The market doesn't care about your emotions, but it teaches you through them. If you're willing to listen, every candle is a conversation between your mind and your habits. And what you'll find, if you stay long enough, aware enough, humble enough, is that greed is not an enemy to be killed. It's a teacher to be understood, because greed shows you where you still seek validation. It shows you where you confuse progress with pleasure. It shows you where you're still afraid to be still. In that way, greed is the most honest mirror you'll ever face. But you don't have to stare at it forever. You can learn from it. You can thank it. And you can move on. Because the opposite of greed isn't poverty. It's presence. Presence gives you back what greed stole. The ability to see clearly, choose calmly, and act consistently. Presence is where patience grows, and patience is where wealth begins. Greed begins as a whisper, but if you don't listen, it becomes a storm. You can't silence it by force. You have to understand its language. Because greed doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in emotion. It speaks in the pulse of your heart when you see a green candle explode upward. It speaks in that instant your palms sweat, your pupils dilate, your breath shortens. That's your limbic system preparing for reward. It's not evil. It's ancient. When you understand that, you stop judging yourself and start studying yourself. And that's the turning point, when you move from being a prisoner of your mind to being its observer. In that moment, you become a trader of awareness, buying patience, selling reaction, compounding clarity. The goal is not to kill greed. You can't. The goal is to transmute it, to take that same energy that once chased chaos and redirect it toward creation. Because inside every act of greed lies a misunderstood desire for growth. You don't want more money. You want more meaning. You don't want the next win. You want to feel alive again. You're not addicted to trading. You're addicted to the feeling of potential. That's the core truth most people miss. You're not broken. You're just miswired. And what neuroscience tells us is beautiful. Wiring can be changed. Let's talk about neuroplasticity. Every thought you repeat carves a groove in your brain, a neural pathway. Think of it as a dirt road. Each time you think, feel, or act the same way, you drive that road again. It becomes smoother, faster, more automatic. So when you've spent months or years responding to market moves with greed or fear, you've built a highway of reactivity. But you can still take a new road, one paved with awareness, restraint, patience. The first drive will feel rough, unnatural, uncomfortable, but with repetition, that new road becomes smoother, until one day, it becomes your default route. That's the miracle of neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to evolve with your discipline. You can literally rewire yourself for calm. Start small. The next time you feel the urge to just take one more trade, don't act. Don't fight it. Just observe it. Say to yourself, this is what greed feels like in my body. Notice where it lives, your chest, your stomach, your hands. Label it without judgment. Because the moment you name an emotion, your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, lights up and takes control. That simple act of awareness moves you from being inside the emotion to being above it. Over time, those micro moments of mindfulness compound. Each pause becomes a brick in the foundation of your discipline. Each observation becomes a vote for your higher self. This is what I call compounding behavior. It's the psychological twin of compounding interest. You don't need massive change overnight. You need small, consistent improvements in self-awareness. Because the mind compounds like money, exponentially, invisibly, and only for those who stay consistent. Now let's talk about a deeper kind of wealth, the wealth of emotional stability. We often say money is freedom, but that's incomplete. Freedom doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what doesn't control you. You can have millions and still be a slave to your phone, to your ego, to your fears, to your endless chase for more. Or you can have little and feel infinite, because your peace is unshakable. True wealth is the ability to feel calm in uncertainty, to stand in the storm and still hear your own breath, to lose and not lose yourself. That's what separates the gambler from the professional, the restless from the master. And it all begins with one inner decision. You either let your emotions trade you, or you trade your emotions. Let's explore what that looks like. When the market spikes and your pulse accelerates, don't jump. When your position bleeds and your mind screams, fix it, don't move. Wait, breathe, watch. You're not suppressing emotion. You're observing it until it loses power. Every urge has a half-life. If you don't feed it with action, it fades. But if you give in, it grows stronger. Every time you delay gratification, you weaken greed's grip and strengthen your inner authority. That's not willpower, it's training. Stanford research shows that delayed gratification, resisting an immediate reward for a larger future reward, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term success. In trading, that means the ability to wait for the right setup instead of reacting to every movement. In life, it means the patience to build something meaningful instead of chasing something shiny. When you master delayed gratification, you become dangerous in the best way, not because you control the market, but because you control yourself. Now let's talk about the third ritual: delayed dopamine and consistency routine. This is where discipline becomes lifestyle. The goal isn't to remove reward, it's to relocate it. You can't stop dopamine, but you can choose what triggers it. Here's how. After every disciplined decision, every time you followed your plan, respected your stop, or closed your trade exactly as intended, take 10 seconds to breathe and say out loud, "That was good." Smile. Feel the satisfaction. You're conditioning your brain to associate pleasure with control. And when you repeat this enough times, your dopamine system starts craving discipline instead of chaos. That's how you transform greed into growth. The science is simple. The brain doesn't care if you reward yourself for good or bad behavior. It only learns from repetition and emotion. So by rewarding the right behaviors with genuine satisfaction, you're rewriting your brain's definition of success. You might think, that sounds too easy. But that's how all deep change works. It's invisible until it becomes inevitable. The more you practice delayed dopamine, the more peace you'll feel. And ironically, that peace will make you more profitable because it allows you to act rationally when others panic. You'll stop chasing the market and start letting it come to you. You'll stop needing to win and start expecting to perform. You'll stop seeing yourself as a trader fighting chaos and start seeing yourself as an observer mastering rhythm. Greed thrives in noise. Mastery grows in silence. That's why I tell every trader I coach, schedule silence. Not as a reward, but as a ritual. 15 minutes of quiet after every session. No screens, no charts, no music. Just you and your thoughts. At first, it will feel unbearable. You'll feel the urge to check something, do something, be something. That's withdrawal, the absence of stimulation your dopamine system once needed. Stay with it. On the other side of discomfort is clarity, and clarity is freedom. Let's talk about that freedom. The kind that can't be measured in dollars or points or PNL. It's the freedom to be fully present, the freedom to enter a trade without fear, to exit without regret, to wake up without anxiety. That's emotional independence, the rarest form of wealth on earth. Most people trade to escape life. Masters trade to understand it, because the same patterns that sabotage your trades, sabotage your relationships, your business, your peace. Trading doesn't create greed. It exposes it. And what you learn to manage in the market, you learn to master in yourself. The moment you start seeing your emotions not as enemies but as data, you stop being reactive and start being intentional. Your anger tells you where you're attached. Your fear tells you where you're uncertain. Your greed tells you where you're still searching for validation. Listen to these signals. They're not problems to fix, but teachers to learn from. Remember the phrase, the market is a mirror. Every chart reflects your psychology. Every trade is a conversation with your subconscious. When you chase a move, you're chasing approval. When you overtrade, you're overcompensating for insecurity. When you can't stop, it's not because of the market. It's because you haven't learned to be still. Stillness isn't passive. It's power under control. It's what allows you to act precisely instead of impulsively. The samurai called it mushin, the mind without mind. It's not emptiness. It's readiness. No attachment to outcome. Full presence in process. That's the ultimate antidote to greed. Not resistance, but readiness. Because when you no longer need to win, you're finally free to play well. Reflect for a moment. When was the last time you traded from peace, not pressure? When was the last time you entered a position because it aligned with your plan, not your pride? When was the last time you felt joy in patience, not panic in waiting? Those are not small questions. They are the compass back to your center. And here's what happens when you find that center. Your results stabilize, your emotions balance, and your energy returns. Because consistency is not born from control. It's born from alignment. Alignment between what you do and who you are. Greed breaks that alignment. It pulls you away from your principles. It whispers that enough is weakness, that patience is passivity, that stillness is stagnation. But none of that is true. Stillness is not stagnation, it's preparation. Patience is not weakness, and it's wisdom. Enough is not failure, it's fulfillment. The moment you understand that, greed loses its voice. You start to notice a beautiful shift. The rush of the market doesn't move you the same way. The noise of the world becomes softer. You start making decisions from clarity, not craving. That's when people begin to notice something about you. A quiet confidence. Not arrogance. Not apathy. Just presence. You no longer chase trends. You let them come. You no longer react to fear. You rate it like data. You no longer try to control the market. You control your response. That's the essence of mastery. Calm action born from deep awareness. It's in that state that real growth begins. Not financial growth, but inner growth. Because the truth is, your trading account will always mirror your emotional account. Withdraw too much from your patience, and you'll pay with losses. Deposit consistency and restraint, and your equity will quietly compound. And that's not just poetic, it's psychological. Because when your nervous system is regulated, your perception sharpens. You see trends earlier, you think clearer, you execute faster. You stop needing to predict, because you've learned to respond. That's when trading stops being a fight, and starts becoming a flow. And that flow, that state where time disappears, where you're fully present, focused, calm, that's the same state elite athletes, artists, and surgeons operate in. It's called flow state, the ultimate intersection of skill, challenge, and awareness. You don't reach it through greed. You reach it through grounded repetition. And when you do, everything changes. The chart becomes simple. The noise fades. Your ego quiets. And the work, the process, becomes enough. That's when trading becomes meditation. Every click, every decision, every pause, a form of prayer to the present moment. You're no longer chasing. You're creating. No longer reacting. You're responding. No longer fighting. You're flowing. That's not philosophy. It's psychology at its highest form, where mastery becomes effortless because discipline has become identity. And when discipline becomes identity, greed dies a natural death. Not because you forced it away, but because you no longer feed it. There comes a moment in every trader's journey and in every human journey when you realize the real battle was never against the market. It was against yourself, and that realization hits quietly, almost sacredly. You see that the charts, the numbers, the outcomes were only instruments, mirrors reflecting the patterns inside you. You see that greed was never about money. It was about meaning. You chased numbers because you thought numbers would give you worth. You chased wins because you thought wins would give you peace. You chased more because you thought more would finally make you feel enough. But every time you reached the peak, the mountain moved. Because you were trying to fill an emotional void with external success, and that void has no bottom. What truly fills it is presence, awareness, gratitude. The quiet knowing that who you are when you trade in alignment, when you act from discipline, not desire, that's the person you were meant to become all along. The world teaches us to chase. The market teaches us to wait. And wisdom begins the moment you realize that waiting is not weakness, it's mastery of timing. So let's talk about timing. Not the kind that wins trades, but the kind that restores lives. Every time you resist greed, you reclaim time. Time you would have spent spiraling in emotion. Time you can now spend building skill, studying quietly, connecting deeply. Because time is the one currency greed can't multiply. It only spends it. There's a story I tell my clients and about a man named Victor. He was a hedge fund trader, brilliant, driven, relentless. He made millions before 40. Private jet, ocean house, everything he thought he wanted. But he couldn't stop. Every win demanded a bigger win. Every high felt smaller than the last. One day he called me after losing 8 figures in a single week. He said, "I don't even care about the money. I just don't know who I am without the chase." That's the voice of greed unmasked. A voice that says, "Without the game, I am nothing." I told him, the goal isn't to kill the game, it's to change the player. Because the real success isn't building an empire. It's building a mind that can stay centered inside one. Over the next year, he rebuilt. Not his fund, but his focus. He meditated every morning before market open. He kept a journal not of trades, but of thoughts. He ended every day with gratitude, listing 3 moments of clarity instead of 3 profits. And one day he said something I'll never forget. "I used to think peace was the prize you get after winning. Now I realize peace is the strategy that makes winning possible." That's it. That's the secret. Peace is not what you earn. It's what you operate from. And once you understand that, greed becomes unnecessary. Greed thrives in scarcity. The belief that you are running out of time, that opportunities are disappearing, that you must grab everything before it's gone. But the truth is, opportunities don't vanish. They recycle. The market resets every day. And so do you, if you choose to. Every morning, you get a new chance to choose your state. You can wake up and trade from fear or from focus. You can chase dopamine or cultivate discipline. You can live in reaction or rise into awareness. That choice, small, quiet, invisible, compounds faster than any stock ever could. So when you wake tomorrow, before you check your phone, before you open your charts, try this. Sit still. Breathe slowly. Say to yourself, "I am not the market. I am the observer of the market." And let that awareness sink into your nervous system like morning light. Because when you remember who you are, not your profits, not your followers, not your outcomes, the market loses its power over you. And in that freedom, something incredible happens. Your performance improves. Why? Because you're no longer trading for validation. You're trading for execution. You're no longer trying to prove yourself. You're expressing yourself. You're no longer chasing emotion. You're managing it. That shift is where mastery lives. It's where discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like alignment. It's where trading stops being about survival and starts being about self-expression. You're not fighting greed anymore. You're flowing through it, like a surfer riding a wave instead of drowning beneath it. And eventually, you'll start to notice a strange paradox. The less you crave, the more you attract. The calmer you become, the clearer your decisions. The more you trust yourself, the less you need to prove anything. That's not mysticism. It's neuroscience. When your nervous system is balanced, your brain accesses higher cognitive states, pattern recognition, creative problem solving, intuition. That's what the world calls luck. But it's not luck. It's alignment. Think of your mind as a lens. Greed fogs it. Gratitude clears it. When you start trading with gratitude for the opportunity, for the skill, for the process itself, your entire perception changes. You stop measuring your day by profit and loss and start measuring it by clarity and consistency. And ironically, that's when profit begins to compound naturally, because clarity always outperforms craving. Pause here. Take a deep breath. Feel what that might be like, to live in that state of steady confidence. Not high, not low, just centered. That's not fantasy. That's freedom. Now let's talk about rebuilding identity, the final stage of transformation. When you remove greed, you create space. And that space must be filled, not with silence, but with something higher. Purpose. because without purpose, the mind always returns to pleasure. If you don't give your energy direction, it will default to distraction. So ask yourself, what is all this for? What are you building? Who are you becoming? If your only answer is more, you'll never arrive. But if your answer is meaning, you'll never stop growing. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It can be simple. It can be providing for your family with integrity. It can be mastering your craft out of respect for yourself. It can be using trading as a path to self-understanding. Whatever it is, anchor to it, because purpose is the only fuel stronger than greed. When you trade with purpose, losses become lessons. Wins become confirmations. Every moment becomes progress. You stop asking, how much did I make? And start asking, how much did I learn? And that single shift transforms your entire relationship with success. Now imagine your future self, 1 year from now. You open your trading journal. You read your notes. You see the mistakes, the lessons, the progress. You see how your emotional spikes have flattened, how your decisions have steadied, how your account and your peace have both grown. You smile, not because of the balance, but because you remember who you were when you started this journey, restless, reactive, chasing ghosts. And now, calm, composed, clear. That's the real profit. The external numbers will fluctuate, but the inner account, your patience, your awareness, your presence, that's your permanent equity. And when you nurture it, everything external aligns naturally. You don't need to chase the market anymore. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. Not your peers, not your past, not even yourself. You've already won the hardest battle, the one against your own impulses. And that's what mastery looks like. Quiet, steady, unshakable. Let's be honest, the world doesn't reward quiet mastery at first. It celebrates noise, risk, and drama. But the longer you walk this path, the more you realize peace doesn't need applause. Peace is its own profit, and that's the real message behind this entire journey. You don't need a new strategy. You need a new state of mind. You don't need more trades. You need more truth. You don't need more wins. You need more wisdom. When you truly understand that, the grip of greed fades like mist in sunlight. You begin to see that every impulse you once obeyed was just a shadow, a distraction from your deeper power. And as that shadow lifts, you rediscover something you thought you'd lost. Joy. Not the ecstatic rush of a lucky trade. The quiet joy of control, clarity, peace. You realize that discipline isn't restriction, it's liberation. It's the freedom to act without being driven by need. It's the confidence to walk away from noise and stand in truth. And in that freedom, you become untouchable. So when the next temptation comes, when the voice of greed whispers, "Take it. You deserve it," smile. Because now you know it's game. Now you can look at that whisper and say, "I don't need more. I need meaning." And that sentence, simple, grounded, final, is the end of greed. From here, your life changes quietly. Your trades slow down, your thoughts sharpen, your emotions stabilize. You find yourself enjoying the process again. You start to notice beauty in boredom. You begin to realize that mastery was never about force. It was about faith. Faith in your process, faith in your patience, faith in yourself. And as that faith compounds, you become something rare. A trader who doesn't chase, a leader who doesn't boast, a man who doesn't need more. To feel whole, that's who you've been becoming all along. So take one final breath. Feel the weight lift off your shoulders, the pressure, the comparison, the endless chase. Exhale it, let it go, because you don't need to chase what's already within you. You don't need to grasp for peace. You are peace when you remember to be, and that, my friend, is the real psychology of greed. It was never about wanting more. It was about forgetting what you already have. Now you remember. And now you're free. If this message resonated with you, if it reminded you of who you truly are beneath the noise and numbers, take a moment to share it. And if you're ready to keep building the kind of discipline that leads not just to profit, but to peace, make sure you subscribe, because this journey is just beginning. You don't need a new market. You need a new mindset. You don't need more control. You need more consciousness. And from this moment on, you'll never look at greed or yourself the same way again.